The restaurant was alive with the usual sounds of clinking cutlery, murmurs of conversations, and the faint smell of tomato sauce and garlic drifting from the kitchen. The young waitress moved gracefully between tables, balancing plates, refilling glasses, and always wearing a polite smile. She had worked there for years, but she never stopped noticing the little things. The way a customer's eyes lit up at a favorite dish, or how the old man at the corner table always kept a single rose beside his plate. Life for her was a careful rhythm of work and home, managing her siblings' needs and dreaming of something more, though she often kept those dreams to herself. That evening, the restaurant felt different. A hush seemed to settle over the room as a woman walked in with a quiet confidence that made heads turn. She was older, yet there was a strength in her posture and a sharpness in her eyes that commanded attention without needing to raise her voice. Whispers spread among the staff and diners, but the waitress barely noticed. She had seen many interesting people come and go. What caught her attention, though, was the calm way the woman surveyed the room, as if she were taking everything in with a careful, measured gaze. The woman approached the table the waitress was tending to and asked politely for a recommendation. The waitress, slightly nervous but maintaining her composure, suggested a few dishes that were particularly popular that evening. The woman listened carefully, nodding, her eyes never leaving the waitress's face. There was something in the way she observed, a subtle intensity, that made the young waitress pause and choose her words more thoughtfully. Small talk began innocently. The woman asked where she worked, and the waitress explained it was a family-run place, and she had been there for several years. She spoke about her siblings and the responsibilities she carried, how she helped her younger brother with homework after school, and made sure her sister always had clean clothes. The woman nodded, listening quietly, occasionally asking a question that revealed she was paying close attention. The waitress had encountered polite interest before, but this felt different. It was as if the woman were seeing more than just her words. She seemed to be understanding the weight the young woman carried every day. The conversation flowed naturally, though there was a subtle tension beneath it, like a quiet thread weaving through the words that made the waitress feel both curious and slightly wary. The woman asked about her life outside work, and the waitress, trusting the warmth in the woman's voice, shared little stories about her childhood, the small joys she found in everyday life, and the struggles of growing up with limited resources. She spoke honestly, not realizing how carefully the woman was listening. Every detail, every pause, every expression seemed to be noticed, recorded in a way that made the waitress feel strangely seen. As the conversation continued, the woman's questions grew more thoughtful. She asked about what the waitress hoped for in the future, what dreams she kept close to her heart. The waitress hesitated at first, unsure if she should reveal too much. But something about the woman's presence encouraged her honesty. She spoke about wanting to pursue education, perhaps open her own business one day, and her desire to create a better life for her siblings. Her voice carried a mixture of hope and fear, the kind that comes from living in a world where dreams often feel just out of reach. The woman nodded slowly, her expression unreadable, though her eyes conveyed a deep understanding. She commented on the resilience and intelligence of the young woman, noting how impressive it was that she managed so much at such a young age. The waitress felt a flush of pride mixed with embarrassment. She wasn't used to such direct acknowledgement. It was rare that someone took the time to truly listen and notice the effort behind her daily routine. As the plates were cleared and fresh ones brought out, the woman shifted slightly, asking more personal questions without seeming intrusive. She wanted to know how the waitress felt about the people she served, the challenges she faced, and the moments that made her job worthwhile. The waitress answered with sincerity, sharing anecdotes about regular customers, funny incidents, and even moments of frustration that came with the job. The woman laughed softly at appropriate moments, her presence calm and grounding, yet there was an intensity in her eyes that never wavered. The restaurant staff noticed the unusual interaction, some stealing glances, others whispering among themselves. The young waitress, however, remained focused, balancing professionalism with the natural warmth that had drawn the woman's attention in the first place. She felt a strange mixture of nerves and comfort, an odd sense that this conversation, though brief, held weight beyond the ordinary exchange between server and guest. The woman's attention to detail was subtle but deliberate. She commented on the waitress's posture, the way she handled the dishes, the careful tone she used with customers, and even the way she listened attentively to those around her. The young waitress was initially unaware of the scrutiny but gradually realized that this woman was no ordinary guest. Her presence carried authority and discernment, though it was wrapped in kindness rather than intimidation. The conversation moved seamlessly from small talk to observations about life, family, and responsibility. The woman asked the waitress about her upbringing, gently probing for insights without pressuring her. The waitress spoke of the values instilled in her by her parents, the lessons learned through hardship, and the moments that shaped her character. The woman nodded thoughtfully, occasionally jotting down mental notes, connecting the dots, understanding more than the waitress could have imagined. By the time the meal was coming to an end, the young waitress felt a strange bond forming with the woman. It was as if the brief encounter had created a bridge of understanding, a silent acknowledgement of shared humanity. The woman, in turn, seemed satisfied, having gleaned the information she needed, though it was not immediately clear what that information might be. She thanked the waitress warmly, leaving a generous tip, but it was the conversation itself that lingered in the young woman's mind long after the woman had left the restaurant. As the evening wore on and the restaurant began to quiet down, the waitress reflected on the encounter. She realized that something significant had happened, even if she didn't fully understand it yet. The woman's questions, her attentiveness, and the subtle way she had observed everything left an impression that was both flattering and intimidating. For the first time in a long while, the waitress felt truly recognized for her efforts, her resilience, and the quiet strength she carried through her daily life. The encounter had been ordinary on the surface, a polite conversation between a guest and a server, but it carried a weight beneath it that the young waitress couldn't quite place. There was a sense that her honesty and openness had been noticed in a way that mattered. Little did she know, this brief meeting would have consequences far beyond the walls of the restaurant, setting in motion a chain of events that would reach people she could never have imagined, and revealing truths that would affect lives in ways she had yet to understand. After that first encounter, the young waitress went home that night with a mixture of curiosity and unease. She couldn't stop thinking about the older woman who had approached her in the restaurant. There was something unusual about her, something that made her feel both safe and unsettled at the same time. She replayed their conversation in her mind, remembering the sharp yet kind eyes, the quiet strength, and the way the woman had listened to every detail of her life as if it mattered more than anything else in the world. The next day, the restaurant was back to its usual rhythm. The young waitress moved through the tables, serving meals and engaging with customers with her usual warm smile. Yet, her thoughts kept drifting back to the conversation. She found herself wondering what had prompted the woman to speak to her in such a personal way. Why had she asked about her family and her dreams? What was it that made this seemingly ordinary encounter feel so significant? She couldn't answer any of these questions, but a quiet excitement simmered beneath the surface, a feeling that something important was unfolding without her realizing it. Later that afternoon, the woman returned. This time, she requested a table in a quieter corner, where they could talk without interruption. The young waitress brought over the menus, careful to be polite yet attentive. The woman did not rush. She took her time studying the menu, though it was clear she wasn't particularly interested in the food. Her eyes were fixed on the waitress, observing the smallest gestures, the subtle expressions that often went unnoticed. It was as if she were trying to understand the very soul of the young woman in front of her. The waitress approached slowly, her curiosity tinged with nervousness. She felt a strange pressure to be honest, to speak her truth in a way that she rarely allowed herself to do. The woman began with gentle questions, asking about her day, her family, and her routine. The young waitress responded with genuine answers, describing the challenges of managing her responsibilities at home, the small triumphs she found in her work, and the dreams she carried quietly in her heart. Every word seemed to be met with thoughtful attention, as if the woman were not just listening, but understanding. The conversation soon moved to deeper topics. The woman asked the waitress about her hopes for the future, And this time, the young woman felt more confident sharing. She spoke about her desire to continue her education, to someday own her own business, and to create a better life for her siblings. She admitted that sometimes it felt impossible, that the world often seemed to close in on her with responsibilities and limitations that were hard to escape. Yet, she spoke with determination, revealing a resilience that had been forged through years of struggle and sacrifice. The woman nodded quietly, her expression thoughtful. She asked follow-up questions, gently probing for more details, encouraging the young waitress to explore her own thoughts and feelings. The waitress found herself opening up more than she ever had with a stranger, drawn by the calm yet intense presence of the woman before her. She spoke about her fears, her doubts, and the moments of weakness she tried to hide from everyone else. The woman listened without judgment, offering subtle encouragement, her presence both comforting and authoritative. As the conversation continued, the young waitress began to notice small, almost imperceptible cues in the woman's behavior. The way she leaned forward slightly when the waitress spoke of challenges, the way her eyes softened when the young woman described her siblings, and the occasional pause that suggested careful consideration of every word. It was clear that the woman was not just listening, but absorbing, analyzing, and understanding. This realization made the waitress both uneasy and intrigued. The woman shifted the conversation toward the people in the young waitress's life. She asked about friends, mentors, and acquaintances, probing gently for connections that might have shaped her character. The waitress spoke of her community, the neighbors who had helped her family in times of need, and the teachers who had encouraged her academic pursuits. She shared stories of kindness and generosity, moments that had inspired her to keep striving despite difficulties. The woman seemed to take mental notes, her expression revealing nothing, yet the intensity of her gaze suggested that every detail was being carefully considered. Eventually, the woman asked a question that made the young waitress pause. She inquired about a person she had heard the waitress mention briefly in passing, someone connected to influential circles. The waitress hesitated, unsure of what to say, but answered honestly, describing her limited knowledge and the circumstances in which she had encountered this person's name. The woman listened intently, her expression unchanged, but the young waitress sensed a shift in the air. There was a quiet tension, a subtle change in energy that hinted at the importance of the information she had just shared. After a few more minutes of conversation, the woman thanked the waitress warmly. She left a generous tip on the table, but it was not the money that lingered in the young woman's mind. It was the attention, the validation, and the sense that her words mattered to someone in a profound way. The encounter had revealed a side of life she rarely experienced, one where honesty, resilience, and courage were recognized and respected. As the woman departed, the young waitress felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. She returned to her duties with a renewed sense of purpose, her thoughts still occupied by the conversation. She realized that something had shifted within her, a quiet awakening that made her more aware of her own strength and potential. The experience left her both inspired and cautious, understanding that the world contained forces and influences far beyond her everyday life. In the days that followed, the young waitress found herself reflecting on the encounter repeatedly. She remembered the warmth in the woman's voice, the subtle encouragement in her eyes, and the careful attention to every detail she had shared. Each memory reinforced the feeling that this was no ordinary meeting. It was a turning point, one that held the promise of unexpected consequences and opportunities, though she could not yet see them clearly. She also noticed the subtle changes in her own behavior. She walked with a little more confidence, spoke with a bit more authority, and carried herself with a quiet pride. The conversation had reminded her of the value of honesty, the strength found in vulnerability, and the power of being truly seen. Even in the mundane tasks of her daily work, she felt a renewed sense of purpose, a deeper understanding that every action, every word, and every choice could have significance beyond what she could immediately perceive. The young waitress continued her routine, but with a new perspective. She engaged with customers more attentively, listened with greater empathy, and approached challenges with a fresh determination. The memory of the woman's presence became a silent guide, influencing her decisions and interactions. She recognized that this brief, seemingly ordinary encounter had imparted lessons that would shape her in ways she had not yet imagined. Though life continued with its usual demands, the young waitress felt a growing awareness that something important was unfolding. The woman had seen her, understood her, and perhaps even chosen to trust her with information that carried weight. The realization brought both excitement and caution, as she sensed that the ripple effects of their conversation were far from over. The world outside her familiar routine seemed larger, more complex, and filled with possibilities she had never considered. And so, she carried on, balancing work, family, and dreams, but with a quiet strength born from recognition and connection. She knew that the encounter had left a mark, an invisible thread linking her life to forces she had yet to fully comprehend. The experience stayed with her, guiding her actions and shaping her perspective. A reminder that even the smallest interactions could hold profound meaning and that honesty, courage, and resilience could resonate in ways that reach far beyond the immediate moment. A few days after the second encounter, the young waitress noticed that the memory of the woman lingered more strongly than before. She couldn't stop thinking about the careful attention in the older woman's eyes, the way she had listened to every word, and the subtle hints that suggested she understood more than she let on. The restaurant felt busier than usual, but the young waitress moved through the tables with her usual grace, all the while reflecting on the strange, almost magnetic presence of the visitor. On this day, she received a message at the restaurant from the woman, asking if they could meet again in a quiet corner after the evening rush. The waitress felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. She wondered what the woman wanted this time and why she seemed so intent on speaking with her personally. As the evening progressed, the restaurant's noise faded into a background hum, and she prepared herself for another meeting that felt far more significant than a simple conversation. When the woman arrived, she was calm, composed, and carrying an air of seriousness that immediately set the tone. She requested the same quiet corner, and the waitress brought over menus, though they remained largely untouched. The woman gestured for the waitress to sit and began speaking with a voice that was gentle, yet carried a weight that made the young woman lean in closer, eager to hear every word. This time, the conversation took a different direction. The woman began to ask more detailed questions about the young waitress's interactions outside the restaurant. She asked if she had ever encountered unusual situations, noticed anything suspicious, or overheard conversations that seemed out of place. The waitress, initially taken aback, thought carefully before answering. She described a few incidents she had witnessed, small things she had dismissed at the time as inconsequential. Little did she know, those small details were exactly what the woman had been listening for, piecing together a picture of connections and circumstances that the young waitress had not even considered. The woman listened intently, nodding occasionally, and asked follow-up questions with precision. She wanted to know exactly how the young waitress had come across certain people, the circumstances of their presence, and what she thought of them. The waitress answered honestly, providing descriptions without embellishment. She mentioned names she had overheard, interactions that had seemed ordinary, and behaviors she had noted out of curiosity rather than suspicion. Each response was absorbed by the woman, who maintained a calm expression but whose mind was clearly working behind those sharp, perceptive eyes. At one point, the woman paused and leaned forward slightly, her gaze intense. She asked about a specific encounter the young waitress had mentioned in passing days ago. The waitress recounted the story, unaware of its significance. She explained the setting, the people involved, and what she had seen or heard. As she spoke, the woman's expression subtly shifted. The corners of her mouth tightened slightly, her eyes widened imperceptibly, and a quiet tension filled the air. It was the first sign that something serious had been revealed, though the waitress could not yet tell what it was. After a few moments of silence, the woman spoke softly, almost to herself, before directing her words to the waitress. She explained that the information she had just shared, though seemingly minor, had significant implications. The young waitress felt a chill run down her spine. She had spoken truthfully, without realizing the weight her words carried. The woman's calm voice and measured tone contrasted sharply with the tension that seemed to hang over the table, making the young woman acutely aware of the importance of what had just transpired. The woman asked for further clarification on specific points, gently probing for details the waitress had not thought were relevant. The waitress described locations, times, and the manner in which people had interacted. She explained what she had seen, what she had overheard, and the context as she understood it. Each word seemed to be carefully considered by the woman, who nodded subtly, her eyes reflecting a deep understanding and perhaps even concern. The waitress began to realize that her ordinary observations had unintentionally uncovered something significant, something she had never intended to reveal. As the conversation progressed, the young waitress became more aware of the seriousness of the situation. She noticed the subtle tension in the woman's posture, the careful consideration in her gaze, and the deliberate pauses that suggested she was connecting the dots in real time. There was a quiet authority in the woman that made it clear she was accustomed to handling sensitive information. The waitress, despite her initial nervousness, continued to answer truthfully, trusting the calm yet commanding presence before her. The woman then explained, without revealing too much, that the information the young waitress had shared touched upon matters of great importance. It was clear that the details she had provided were not just observations. They were pieces of a larger puzzle that could have serious consequences. The young waitress felt a mix of fear and amazement. She had never imagined that her everyday life, her simple honesty, could intersect with such high stakes. Throughout the conversation, the woman emphasized the importance of discretion, trust, and careful observation. She encouraged the young waitress to continue being honest and aware, explaining that even seemingly small details could have a meaningful impact. The young woman listened intently, absorbing every word, understanding that her honesty and attention to detail were being recognized as valuable traits in a context far beyond her own experiences. As the evening wore on, the woman concluded the conversation with a measured sense of finality. She thanked the waitress for her honesty and for sharing her observations so openly. She left a generous tip, but more importantly, she left the waitress with a sense of responsibility and awareness that had not existed before. The young woman realized that she had become part of something larger than herself, an unexpected witness to information that could influence outcomes she had never imagined. After the woman left, the young waitress returned to her duties with a heightened sense of awareness. Every interaction, every word spoken, and every detail observed took on new significance. She reflected on how ordinary moments in her life could carry weight and how her honesty had inadvertently played a role in a situation far beyond her understanding. The encounter had shifted her perspective, leaving her more mindful of the power of observation and the importance of integrity. In the days that followed, the young waitress noticed subtle changes in how she approached her work and her life. She became more observant, more attentive, and more aware of the people and situations around her. She understood that even small actions could have unforeseen consequences and that her voice, her observations, and her choices mattered in ways she had not previously considered. The encounter with the woman had left an indelible mark on her, one that would influence her decisions and perspective for the days to come. Though she continued her daily routines, the young waitress carried with her a quiet sense of responsibility and a growing awareness of the world beyond her immediate surroundings. She understood that the information she had provided had changed something, though she did not yet fully comprehend the extent of its impact. The experience reinforced the value of honesty, attentiveness, and courage, showing her that even in ordinary circumstances, the truth she spoke could have extraordinary consequences. And so, life went on in the restaurant, but the young waitress moved through it with a new understanding. Every smile she offered, every interaction she engaged in, and every detail she noticed became part of a larger awareness. She had witnessed the unexpected power of honesty and observation, and she knew that the consequences of her words could reach far beyond what she could immediately see. The experience left her both humbled and inspired, aware that even in the most ordinary moments, extraordinary events could unfold and shape the lives of those around her in ways she had never imagined. The house was quiet when the Mafia boss returned that evening, a calm that contrasted sharply with the storm of thoughts in his mind. He had barely crossed the threshold when his mother called him into the study, her tone calm but carrying an unmistakable weight. He obeyed, sensing immediately that something significant had occurred. She gestured for him to sit, her expression serious yet controlled, the kind of composure that only came from years of navigating situations far beyond ordinary understanding. She began by recounting her encounter with the young waitress, describing the conversations they had shared in detail. Her voice was measured, deliberate, each word carefully chosen. She explained how the waitress had spoken honestly about her life, her observations, and her interactions with people connected to influential circles. The boss listened intently, his mind piecing together the implications of what his mother was saying. He realized that the young waitress, without intending to, had provided information that no one else had known, observations that revealed vulnerabilities and details that could not be ignored. As she continued, the mother emphasized the significance of the details the waitress had shared. It was not the words alone, but the context, the timing, and the subtle connections between events and people that made the information critical. The boss felt a chill run through him as he considered the possible consequences. He had always believed that his operations were secure, that his inner circle was the only source of influence and knowledge. Now, it seemed that even an outsider, someone entirely unrelated, could impact the course of events through simple honesty and observation. He leaned back in his chair, trying to process the information. His mother, observing him closely, noted the change in his expression, the pale complexion, the slight tension in his jaw, the way his eyes darted as if calculating risks and outcomes. She remained calm, allowing him the space to absorb the gravity of the situation. Her presence was both grounding and authoritative, a reminder that she had been navigating these kinds of revelations far longer than he had. The conversation shifted toward possible actions, though his mother carefully avoided suggesting anything that might escalate the situation unnecessarily. She spoke of caution, observation, and strategic thinking, emphasizing that any response needed to be calculated and deliberate. The boss realized that the young waitress's honesty had created both a risk and an opportunity. Her inadvertent revelation had exposed a weakness, but it also provided a chance to address the issue before it became a real problem. He thought about the waitress, the way she had spoken, the sincerity in her voice, and the unassuming nature of her observations. It was remarkable that someone so ordinary in appearance could influence outcomes at such a high level without even realizing it. The boss felt a strange mixture of admiration and apprehension. He had always relied on loyalty, secrecy, and control, but here was an example of how transparency and honesty could penetrate even the most carefully guarded walls. His mother then outlined her perspective on the best course of action. She suggested that rather than reacting with anger or aggression, they could use the information strategically. The young waitress's observations could be verified, leveraged, and protected, turning a potential vulnerability into a source of insight. The boss listened, understanding that his mother's experience and wisdom were guiding him through a complex situation that required patience, subtlety, and careful planning. He reflected on the events that had led to this moment, from the waitress's simple acts of honesty to his mother's attentive listening. It was clear that small actions, even those that seemed inconsequential, could have far-reaching effects. The boss realized that he had underestimated the power of ordinary people and the importance of paying attention to details that others might overlook. The young waitress had unwittingly highlighted the interconnectedness of events and the significance of truth in ways he had not anticipated. The mother continued, describing how the waitress's behavior, demeanor, and careful responses indicated character traits that were rare and valuable. She had shown courage, honesty, and resilience, qualities that could be trusted and potentially relied upon in delicate situations. The boss considered how these traits could be acknowledged and used without exposing her to unnecessary danger or pressure. He understood that she was an unexpected ally, someone outside the immediate circle whose actions could still influence outcomes profoundly. Throughout the discussion, the boss felt a growing sense of responsibility. He needed to act, but he also needed to act wisely. The information provided by the waitress had created both risk and opportunity, and the way he responded could determine whether it became a problem or a benefit. His mother's calm guidance reminded him that impulsive reactions could be dangerous and that patience and observation were key to navigating complex situations. As the conversation drew to a close, the boss reflected on the broader implications of what had occurred. The young waitress, entirely unaware of her impact, had demonstrated that honesty, attentiveness, and integrity could resonate far beyond the immediate moment. Her observations had reached into a world of power, influence, and risk, affecting decisions at the highest level. The boss realized that the world was more interconnected than he had assumed, and that even the smallest actions could ripple outward in unexpected ways. The mother left him with a final thought: the importance of trust, discretion, and careful assessment of information. She reminded him that actions taken in haste could have unintended consequences, and that observing the character and intentions of those involved was crucial. The boss felt the weight of responsibility, understanding that his next moves needed to be deliberate, informed, and precise. He spent the remainder of the evening reviewing the details, replaying the conversations in his mind, and considering the implications. The young waitress, in her innocence and honesty, had provided insight that was both invaluable and potentially disruptive. The realization left him pale not just from concern, but from the awareness that ordinary people, through simple honesty and awareness, could influence events in ways he had never imagined. He understood that his perception of control was challenged, and that adaptability, wisdom, and restraint would be essential moving forward. In the quiet moments that followed, the boss contemplated the nature of influence, honesty, and observation. He realized that his mother's wisdom had transformed what could have been a moment of risk into an opportunity for understanding and strategic advantage. The young waitress, unknowingly, had become a key part of this unfolding situation, her honesty and courage shining through in ways that demanded attention and respect. As the night deepened, the boss acknowledged the subtle yet profound lessons of the encounter. He understood that the world was not only shaped by power and authority but also by the integrity and courage of those who might seem insignificant at first glance. The young waitress's actions, though simple and sincere, had revealed truths that could not be ignored, truths that demanded careful consideration, strategic thinking, and respect for the unexpected ways in which human honesty could shape outcomes. By the end of the evening, the boss had formed a plan rooted in patience, discretion, and observation. He recognized that reacting hastily could jeopardize the advantage that had emerged from the waitress's inadvertent revelation. He decided to monitor the situation closely, appreciate the courage and honesty of those involved, and act with precision when the time was right. The encounter with the waitress had forever altered his perspective, reinforcing the power of integrity, the impact of awareness, and the unexpected ways ordinary people could influence even the most controlled and guarded lives. In the days that followed, life continued at the restaurant with its usual rhythm, but for the young waitress, nothing felt ordinary anymore. She noticed that her awareness of the world around her had sharpened. Every glance, every whispered conversation, and every unusual occurrence drew her attention in a way it never had before. She couldn't have known how closely connected her everyday life had become to people far beyond her understanding, and she certainly didn't realize the profound impact her honesty would have. Meanwhile, the Mafia boss, guided by his mother's careful strategy, observed the situation with a measured patience. He understood that the young waitress had unknowingly become part of a larger picture, someone whose integrity and openness could be both a risk and a resource. Instead of acting out of fear or anger, he decided to approach the circumstances with restraint, seeing the potential to turn the revelation into an advantage. The tension that had initially caused him to pale had transformed into a cautious optimism as he recognized the value of unexpected allies. The waitress, unaware of her growing influence, continued her work as usual, greeting customers, taking orders, and sharing small moments of warmth with those she served. She found joy in simple gestures, in the smiles of regular patrons, and in the quiet satisfaction of completing her tasks with care. Yet, there was a subtle shift in her demeanor, a quiet confidence that had grown since her encounters with the older woman. She carried herself with a newfound awareness, understanding that her words and actions held weight even in ways she could not immediately see. One afternoon, the woman returned once more to the restaurant. She requested a quiet table in the corner, and the waitress, recognizing her instantly, approached with a polite yet curious smile. The conversation this time was less about observation and more about guidance. The woman offered encouragement, praising the waitress for her honesty and her ability to navigate complex social interactions with grace. She spoke gently about the importance of discernment, empathy, and awareness, explaining that these traits were invaluable in a world filled with both opportunities and risks. As they spoke, the young waitress realized that her simple acts of honesty had not only been noticed, but had also created a bridge of trust and understanding with someone who wielded significant influence. The woman, in turn, hinted at the importance of observing character and intent, showing that courage and sincerity could open doors and shape outcomes in unexpected ways. The waitress felt a sense of responsibility, knowing that even though she was ordinary in appearance, her integrity mattered and could make a difference. The conversation naturally shifted to her dreams and aspirations. The woman encouraged her to continue pursuing her goals, to remain resilient in the face of challenges, and to trust in her own judgment. She spoke of the strength that comes from honesty, the wisdom gained from careful observation, and the unexpected influence that ordinary people can have on those in positions of power. The waitress listened intently, absorbing every word, feeling both inspired and grounded by the guidance. As the meeting concluded, the woman left a generous tip, but more importantly, she left the waitress with a sense of validation and empowerment. The young woman returned to her duties with a renewed spirit, understanding that her actions, words, and observations could ripple outward, affecting outcomes far beyond her immediate environment. She recognized the interconnectedness of her world and the subtle ways in which integrity and honesty could shape events. In the following weeks, the young waitress's life continued with its usual routines, yet the impact of her encounters lingered. She became more mindful in her interactions, more observant of the nuances in people's behavior, and more confident in expressing herself. She understood that her honesty had consequences, and that even seemingly small revelations could influence decisions and outcomes in profound ways. This awareness did not weigh her down. Instead, it empowered her to act with intention, empathy, and discernment. The Mafia boss, observing from a distance, recognized the young waitress's potential and the inadvertent assistance she had provided. He continued to rely on his mother's guidance, making decisions with care and precision. Her honesty had revealed vulnerabilities he could address, and her resilience and character had earned an unexpected place of influence. He appreciated the subtle power of human integrity and the way ordinary people could shape extraordinary circumstances without even realizing it. Over time, the young waitress began to notice subtle changes in her interactions with others. People seemed to respond to her with greater openness and trust. Her attentiveness, empathy, and sincerity were recognized and valued in ways that extended beyond the walls of the restaurant. She found that her honest and thoughtful nature attracted respect and created opportunities for connection. The lessons she had learned from her encounters with the older woman became part of her daily life, guiding her actions and decisions. The story of the waitress, the older woman, and the Mafia boss demonstrated that integrity, courage, and honesty could transcend social boundaries and influence even the most guarded individuals. The waitress, through her authenticity, had become a subtle force in a complex web of relationships and decisions. She had unknowingly impacted lives in ways that required wisdom, patience, and strategy to fully understand and navigate. As the months passed, the waitress continued to live her life with a quiet strength, balancing work, family responsibilities, and personal aspirations. She understood that her words and observations mattered, and that her honesty had the power to affect outcomes beyond her imagination. The encounters with the older woman and the awareness of the Mafia boss's reaction had instilled in her a deeper understanding of human nature, influence, and the importance of integrity. The final twist came not through dramatic confrontation or overt recognition, but through subtle acknowledgement. The young waitress, in her ordinary and sincere way, had created a ripple that altered perceptions and decisions at the highest levels. The Mafia boss, guided by his mother, understood the value of her character and honesty, seeing that ordinary individuals could reveal extraordinary truths. Her presence, her courage, and her openness had provided insight and guidance in ways that no one could have predicted. In the end, The young waitress remained unaware of the full extent of her impact, but she continued to live with authenticity, empathy, and awareness. Her story became a quiet testament to the power of honesty, the influence of ordinary people, and the unexpected ways in which truth can shape outcomes. The encounters with the older woman and the indirect connection to the Mafia boss underscored the profound lesson that integrity and courage, even in small acts, can resonate far beyond the immediate moment, leaving a lasting impression on those who encounter it.